A little bit of a behind the scenes peek on one of the biggest players in DeFi working with some really big names in fintech. This was announced at the ETC conference in Paris, and we learned later a video of the presentation was deleted at Uniswap's request in a nod to the powers of decentralization. A video version of it lived on the interplanetary file system, and I think we have a clip. So let's roll that clip right now.
These are all huge, kind of solvable problems that DeFi is addressing every single day. And Uniswap is super excited to be sort of at the forefront of that. And we're doing a lot of work actually to work closely with these kind of consumer, think of them as like consumer financial applications. So you've got like the PayPals and the E-Trades and the Robin Hoods of the world. We're trying to put Uniswap and the rest of DeFi sort of right there in those applications that the users are already using so that we can bring the dream of sort of open 100% uptime liquidity to the whole world.
So that right there is Uniswap Labs growth lead Ashley Schapp. She was spilling a little bit of tea about what Uniswap is up to in terms of merging some DeFi backend into the world of fintech. Now, we asked everyone involved in this story for comment. They all stonewalled us. They said, no, we don't want to talk, or they just didn't reply. And then when the story went live, Hayden Adams, that guy right there, the founder of Uniswap, tweeted some details saying that, hey, yep, sorry, we don't have any partnerships with these folks. We requested the video be taken down so not to misrepresent the early stage conversations that are ongoing. So just an interesting little behind the scenes peek at how it's getting done. But I think it speaks to the broader interest in the crypto market from mainstream players. And of course, sort of a growing awareness of what DeFi might be able to do at a mainstream level. I'm going to throw this straight to Will. Will, a little bit, again, behind the scenes peek at what Uniswap is doing. What are your thoughts on what ended up being an interesting little story yesterday?
I think it's the future for Uniswap. They're $1 billion plus vehicle for trading any kind of asset or token on the Ethereum network. And they're even bridging that with adding some other tokens like wrapped Bitcoin, or even there's like some stable coins that you can trade that are backed by gold. So it kind of like merging into securities land there, which was a conversation topic last week when their front portal blocked access to some tokens. Of course, you can always access those tokens on the backside if you wish to. But going back to just even earlier in the year, I remember talking with Dan Robinson, who was the co-writer of the Uniswap white paper and the Uniswap V3 white paper. And he said that Uniswap had been in talks with Coinbase for providing liquidity for some of the larger pools. So for example, if you want to trade Ether and USDC coin, which is like a stable coin backed by the dollar, it's probably better to go to Uniswap and get a price quote from that pool just because of how much liquidity is on the Uniswap protocol. You're going to get a better price at the end of the day if you go to that versus if you go to a centralized exchange like Coinbase. So that same kind of value or proposition holds true if you're trying to buy Ethereum on, say, Robinhood. Well, it's probably better to get a better price quote just from Uniswap. And that's what all this DeFi kind of stuff is. In the backside, at some point, it's really going to be the rails for interacting with the financial economy. It doesn't always have to be a front-facing part. Uniswap can be behind the scenes, the plumbing and the pipe of the financial economy. But Zach, I want to throw it back to you. Interesting to see that they didn't want to comment on this. Obviously, these bigger players have a lot of reporting diligence they have to do. Robinhood just IPO'd this morning. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just sort of a PR tactic. I think we see it often, right? It's like, let's just stonewall, and then when the story comes out, then we'll have something that we can pick on. And I think that's what happened here. I mean, I think this is a really, really, really interesting story because it does suggest a future in which these are the protocols that power stuff that many millions of people use on a regular basis, right? And they won't even necessarily know that they're interacting with these protocols, just like we don't know what video protocol we're using right now to stream this, or we don't know the specifics of how our email is being sent around the world. If there is a future in which E-Trade, Robinhood, PayPal, or some other people not mentioned in this talk before they should have been mentioned, if that future does come to pass, it's quite interesting for what DeFi represents. And I think it's really interesting to see, again, this sneak peek at conversations that are still in the early stages. Naomi, I saw your hand up. I'm super curious for your take on this one.
Yeah, three things. First thing, a lesson that anything you put on the internet is forever. So be mindful of that, everyone. Second of all, I feel super bad for her because clearly she wasn't meant to mention any talks at all. Probably they're in preliminary talks or something. And so I hope that she didn't like really put her foot in it after they asked for the video to be taken down. And now it's like this big story. The video was taken down. Like that is the news story. And just onto your point, finally, Zach, I agree. We've seen things like maps, interesting other applications, but with DeFi on the back end going on, I think we're going to see more of that. I would love to see things like Uniswap get integrated with other applications that have huge user bases, because the more people we can introduce to the world of DeFi, the better. Obviously, you have these gatekeepers like PayPal and Robinhood, and they're centralized players, but it is a good bridge to introduce people to this other world. And once they understand what they're doing there, then they can start to use other applications for accessing that DeFi world. So super interesting. I really hope that it happens. But Ben, I'll throw to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny, whenever in the world of crypto something gets taken down or deleted, that becomes a story in and of itself. And again, shouts to IPFS for, that being the protocol that this can exist on in a more permanent way. And, shouts to the permaweb in that regard. I think it's really interesting. I think that, we've talked a lot about how kind of we saw this bull run, right? We peaked around 60K. We've been hovering right around 40 now for a little bit. We're in the 30s there for a while. And I think that, we talked about VC valuations really continuing to go up and up and up. And we're seeing all these raises. And I think that this is just another look at why there is kind of this sustained momentum for the crypto economy more generally right now. To me, the flip side of this is, on one hand, the idea of plumbing of the internet is always really fascinating, particularly when you start mixing that with finance. And so that's a really interesting route if Uniswap does start to provide some of that. On the other hand, I think it was super indicative that, even if these are not partnerships, they don't have to be partnerships. Preliminary talks are the preliminary parts of partnerships, though, let's be honest. And so even having talks and engaging with places like Robinhood, like PayPal, that already have huge user bases, I think gives a lot of insight into why we're continuing to see the momentum there is and how big the players are that are dabbling in this. But Zach, I'll toss it back to you to wrap this one.
Yeah, to his credit, Hayden Adams did mention the Streisand effect of the deleted video drawing more attention to it than it had, than it otherwise would have drawn. So it's really interesting. I mean, plus, this is the biggest DEX on Ethereum. Ethereum is turning 6 this week. If this is somehow the future of enterprise blockchain or enterprise DeFi, giant fintechs using DeFi protocols, that could be really interesting. So we'll be watching this story closely in the months and years ahead.